PowerPoint, and I'm sure you're probably going to have a lot of questions as we go through this, but we prefer that we go through the PowerPoint and save your questions till the end. We'll kind of have a question and answer time. Some of the things that we're covering in the PowerPoint, you might have some different questions relating to that, and I'll try to fill those as best as I can later after the presentation. So I'll turn it over to Lori, and I'll help her with the PowerPoint. Come over here.
Okay, great. Well, as John said, thank you very much for having us this evening. We welcome every opportunity to share information about what we do and hopefully to interest folks to get involved with us and help our kids. So we're going to start with Dshs on the first slide. So Children's Administration is one of several agencies under the Dshs umbrella, and our staff work diligently to keep children safe in their family home, in their parents' homes, whenever possible. But when Children's Administration staff and law enforcement together determine that a child cannot be safe in their parents' home, then our first place to look for that child to go is somewhere safe with a kinship or relative, somebody that has a relative-like relationship, someone the child knows and is familiar and comfortable with that can keep the child safe. When that's not possible, when we can't find a kinship or relative, family or individual in the community, then the child must go into a home that has a foster care license. So the vast majority, well, then our workers work really, really hard to reunite families. Whenever children are taken from their families, we work really, really hard. And the vast majority of children that are separated actually do go home. The vast majority go home very quickly, within a couple of weeks. But there are a few children that don't go home. And so federal and state laws require that states pursue adoption plans for children that are out of their birth parents' homes for 12 months, a full year. And those are federal and state laws that apply across the board to all children. So we work really hard to get those children home to their birth parents, and when that can't happen, we do have to follow the federal and state laws. And so we really want to encourage families and relatives and communities to step up and participate with us and help us care for these children, and to be aware that sometimes these children are going to need permanent, lifelong options other than returning to their birth parent home. So we always need more families to provide temporary care as well as permanent care. And adoption is generally considered the most secure alternative to reunification with the birth family, the most secure lifelong plan for a child that cannot be returned to the birth parent's home. But there are a lot of myths and misunderstandings associated with adoption and how that works. So we're going to just talk about some of those. One of the first myths is that it costs a lot of money to adopt a child. The fact is, it doesn't. It doesn't have to. It can, but it doesn't have to. In fact, it might even be free. And when families provide care for children on a temporary basis as foster parents, they are reimbursed financially for the cost of caring for those children. And medical coverage is provided, daycare needs are provided, therapy needs are met, dental needs are met, everything. So it really is not an outlay of expense for a family to actually care for a child temporarily as a foster parent. And for long term, for permanent, after an adoption occurs, there are continuing supports, including medical coverage that can meet that child's medical needs until they're 18 years of age, or even older if they're still in high school. So, and then there can be financial assistance to families that adopt children out of foster care. So it not only might be free, but it's not going to, provide an income for a family, but it's certainly going to be able to meet a child's needs. Money should never be a reason a child doesn't have a family to call their own. Another myth is people feel that you have to have your own home. Actually, you do not. Many families rent. Families can be foster parents and adopt children in apartment buildings and duplexes and any number of living arrangements. So it is totally a myth that you would have to own your own home. There are certain requirements for becoming a licensed foster parent in regard to housing. just one example of that is, for example, the number of children that can share a bedroom depends on the square foot size of the bedroom, okay? So we can't have, 5 or 6 foster children in a room that's, 5 by 10. So the number of children that can share a room and the sex of the children that can share a room, if they're over the age of 5, boys and girls cannot share a room. So, and then there are a lot of, we know it's a very kind of bureaucratic system, and there are a lot of requirements, but basically they're all designed for safety, for keeping children safe. And we have a pretty high standard of keeping children safe when they're out of their birth parents' home, in a foster home, or an adopted home. So if you want more information regarding what are the requirements to become a foster parent or to get a foster care license, Richard Tagorda is the program manager for DLR, the Division of Licensed Services, and this is his phone number. And he's willing to share any information, answering questions by phone, mail out information to you, sign you up for classes, whatever it is you want. So Richard Tagorda is the person to contact for information about becoming a licensed foster parent. Another myth is that you have to be married. In fact, you don't. Many single parents adopt children. In fact, some children actually have an easier time learning to trust a single adult than they have learning to trust 2 adults. So sometimes we actually are actively looking for a single parent. So single, married, doesn't matter. Another myth is that love is enough. And in fact, that is not really true. Okay? In order to be a successful foster parent or adopted parent of a child that has experienced the kind of trauma that results in a child coming into foster care, parents really need to have a lot of preparation, to be persistent, to have a lot of practice, and to have a lot of patience, and lots of supports. So supports come in terms of families, they come in terms of neighbors, communities, religious groups, everywhere in your community that, it can be professional supports like therapists or schools, but lots and lots of supports is required. This is not a task for anyone to take just independently and on their own. These kids are really challenging. Another myth is that only babies get adopted. In fact, children all the way up to and including age 17 are adopted. I don't know where we are right now in September, but I know that in the first 3 months of this year, 2011, we actually had 4 17-year-olds adopted. One of them adopted 4 days before his 18th birthday, okay, right here in Seattle. So it doesn't really matter how old you are, you still need a family. You still need a place to call your own, somebody that claims you, somebody that's willing to answer the phone at 2 in the morning when you have a flat tire on the freeway at 25. That's what adoption means. It's that lifelong relationship. Okay. So another myth is that some children are too old to be successful in a new family. So the fact is that raising children that have suffered trauma is very challenging no matter how old the child is. We recently had adopted a 4-year-old that spent his 4th birthday in the psychiatric ward at Children's Hospital, and he is now doing beautifully in a secure, permanent, loving adoptive family. Okay? So, yes, a 4-year-old can be extremely challenging, and maybe more so than even some older kids. So, some folks are concerned about teenagers feeling that they're going to rob you blind. Well, the fact is that the teenagers in foster care really mirror the general population of kids in schools and in our community. Some of them are on the honor roll, some of them are troublemakers. Okay? But the teens in foster care are generally not the ones who are, if they're breaking the law, they're usually not in foster care, they're usually in detention or out on the streets. Another myth is that birth parents are scary people. The fact is that birth parents love their children. Okay? And some of them face challenges that are simply too big, too long-standing to overcome, and are just unable to meet the needs of children. Some of them are unable to meet their own needs. But I've been doing adoption of children out of foster care for 28 years last month in August, okay? And I have literally worked with hundreds of birth parents in that time, and I haven't yet met one that didn't love their child, okay? They wouldn't be working with the foster care system if they were really capable and able to give their children the safety and security and parenting that they need, but they love their children, and every child has the right to grow up knowing that. So a little more about the children that are in the foster care system waiting to be adopted. The average age of child is 10 years old. The majority of the children adopted out of the foster care system are over the age of 6. And in the fiscal year, July 1st, 2010 through June 30th of 2011, 1,677 foster children were adopted in Washington State out of foster care. The demographics of the population of children in just here in King County in foster care, in the general population, white families or white people make up 75%, almost 76% of the population. Asian families, just about almost 11%. African American families, a little less than 5.5%. And in foster care, the demographics are a little different. And this is, I don't have this converted into percents because I'm a social worker, I don't really do math. But we can see that there's a huge disproportionality in the representation of children if we look at the numbers of children of color. When white folks make up almost 76% of the population of the county, and yet African American children are 398 in foster care in this county. And white 325, Native American 148, Hispanic 112, Asian Pacific Islander other 84. So I'll talk just briefly about the process of becoming a foster parent or an adopted parent. I mentioned preparation earlier. Preparation involves a minimum of 30 hours training. I know you've already been through it, so if you have questions about what kind of grueling process that might be, I'm sure your compatriot here can help with that. The home study is actually a little bit focused on the home, the dwelling, where the child will live, where the family lives. But it's really more a study of the family, of the people. What are the events and circumstances that have shaped you to the people that you are today? What is it that you bring that makes you a very good or the best parent for this child who's been traumatized or abused and needs a new family? So that home study is really more about the family, about the people and what they can bring to meet that child's needs. Child and family matching, that's the process of once you have a home study and we have the child, how do we match up the child and the family that are going to be a good fit, that are going to be successful together? Okay? I mean, if you're a family that is really athletic, a child that only wants to sit around and read books and listen to music probably isn't a good fit. Okay? So those are kinds of, there are many points that we call match points where we need to really take a careful look at how is a child going to be successful in a particular family. Then transition, that's the process of that child moving into and joining and becoming a member of that family. Okay? That's not an event that just happens the day the child moves. That's a process that happens before the child moves in and continues after the child has moved in, but of becoming a member of that family. Post-placement, that's what happens after the child has joined the family. There's a period of time where the family and the child continue to get adjusted to each other. Assessment of what are the needs of the child and family. Are there additional supports and resources that the family can use? And once those questions are all answered satisfactorily and everyone's ready to proceed, they go to court and finalize their adoption. You know, a wonderful, exciting celebration that occurs in court. It takes about 5 minutes once you get there, but it can take a long time to get there. So preparation, home study, matching, transition, formalization. Okay, so last thing I want to mention is what can you do? Well, you can spread the word, okay? This year in the United States, almost 30,000 young people are aging out of foster care. That means they're turning 18, they're becoming legal adults, and they have no family to claim. No family has claimed them and said, we'll answer the phone for you at 2 a.m. when you have a flat tire on the freeway when you're 25, okay? That is horrible because those young people are at risk. Most of them won't complete their high school education. Most of them, many of them will end up homeless or jobless or both. Many of them may be subject to serious illness or injury and not have access to treatment resources. Many of them will be self-medicating with substance abuse. Many of them will become victims of crime. Many of them will become parents prematurely without the resources to safely raise their own children. And some of them will, of course, become involved in criminal behavior themselves. So what can we do to help? Like I said, you can spread the word. You can talk to your friends, your neighbors, your church groups, your communities, and say, look, our children, these are all our children, and they need us. And so let's step up and become temporary caretakers, permanent, lifelong family members, whatever you can do, or however you can support someone that also is, being a part of someone's support network is also another really significant. Not everyone can or wants to or is able to become a foster parent or an adoptive parent, but everyone can support someone who is doing that. So thank you. That's all. That's my presentation, and we're going to take your questions now. So thank you.
Thank you. This is really eye-opening for me to learn more about this system. However, what surprised me most, as you mentioned, that you said nearly 30,000 young people will grow out of foster children, and because of they are 18. This number is kind of a magic number. How did you guys, in the United States of America, how did you come up with this 18? And we know that they are the most vulnerable time in their life, the young children. And that's the time that you need to give them more advice, more care, more loving, all kind of things. So why 18? And if you have been working for 20-something years, have you ever advocated this number to be changed, particularly for foster children? I mean, the other age is different, but particularly for foster children, if you are seeing that these people are falling out from the class, why 18?
Yeah, I'm not sure where the magic number of 18 came in. I mean, that's always been the legal age in America. The foster care system as a whole, at least here in Washington State, has legislatively adopted services for kids that are 18. So as long as they're still in school, they can remain in foster care on a voluntary basis. So they have to sign an agreement to stay in care until they finish school. During that time, the department can offer them independent living skills, training, things like that. The child has to, the young adult has to be willing to do that. Many of these kids choose not to stay, and they want to go out on their own. Recently, this year, there's been new legislation passed that, let's say you're 18, you know everything, I want out of the foster care system, I want nothing to do with it. Well, you figure out after a month out there on your own that you can't do it, you can come back. They have 6 months to do that now. So we can put them back into the system, offer them services, and help them get back on the road, as long as they're still have completed high school or a vocational program or getting on track with that. So we're working to try to alleviate this problem because it is very concerning, and the risk factors for these kids aging out affects the whole community around them. So I don't know that it's going to be a perfect fix, but the community, the legislative body has passed this law to try to address this, but we still have to have the children or the young adults that are willing to participate. So we are aware that it's a problem, and we're trying to come up with some resolutions to fix that. So, yeah. Yes?
You did a good presentation here, and you asked, how about adaptation from other countries?
We only handle children that are involved in the foster care system. we're not experts on the private international adoptions. Some of these things that Lori talked about, the process, are going to be really similar. Of course, you're dealing country to country when you're doing international adoptions. But as far as the home study, the vetting of the family, a lot of those processes are the same. They're required to do background checks, FBI checks. The families are vetted. And then they're also, with the information that the child is coming with from the other country, sometimes they don't get a lot of information. Sometimes the families go there and meet the child for the first time, and they get maybe a page of information on that child, and then they come home with that child. But the vetting process of the families that the private agencies are approving in this family is very similar to how we approve foster parents. Very similar in process. Does that answer your question? Kind of? Not?
Kind of.
Okay. Yes.
You mentioned with the first children and adopted children, and I know that there are homeless children below 18 years old, and some of them are living with the parents. And do you have access to those children, and how are they kept in the shelter while they are underage? Who is taking care of them while they are alone?
Yeah, so we would only have a relationship with these kids if they were involved in the foster care system. So if the department took an action, a court action, to bring those children into foster care at some point, and we had court approval to do that, then we would provide them services. There's many kids that aren't involved in our system that are street youth. There are community programs to help those kids, but we don't get involved as a department, as a foster care system, unless there's abuse and neglect perpetrated by a parent or caregiver of a vulnerable child. So children that are at-risk youth on the street, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're being abused by a parent or a caregiver. They could be doing that on their own volition, so that's a different matter. The department doesn't serve those kids in foster care. There are some avenues for parents to request services through the court. There's at-risk youth petitions, and also a court action called a child in need of services. That's not a dependency action, but they can access some of our services through foster care through that avenue. So there are some ways for parents and caregivers to access services for kids that are at risk. But it doesn't mean that we touch all of them. And like Lori said, it really takes the community to take care of all these kids that are at risk. We can't do it by ourselves. We need your help.
So you are saying that the single parents can adopt the children as normal people. So what the procedure in the place for those other individuals who are bisexual? Do you have a special procedure for them to adopt, or they can adopt as normal?
In Washington State, we do not discriminate on the basis of sexuality or sexual orientation. So families or individuals, gay, lesbian, transgender, bisexual, are equally accepted and welcome to become foster and adoptive parents.
Yeah, by that number, do you have the figure how many bisexual they have a kid or not?
Well, in 2008, our department headquarters did a statewide survey of 1,800 youth in foster care over the age of 12. And it was an interview of 1,800 children. And the findings of that were that about over 10% of those children identified as other than heterosexual. And I have the details at my desk, but I don't have them all in my head. But we know that for children in foster care, the population of children that self-identify as non-heterosexual, as gay or lesbian or bisexual or transgender or other sexual orientations. They represent greater than the general population, where it's estimated that 1 in 10 persons self-identifies as other than heterosexual. So we know that it's a greater percentage of children in foster care. And it may be that those children, well, there's probably a lot of reasons for that, but because we know that there is a significant population of children who are either identifying as other than heterosexual or questioning their own sexual orientation, it's important to us that we have resources, including families, as well as therapists and other resources in the community, where those kids can feel safe and comfortable and secure. Does that answer your question, or?
Yeah, I would think maybe you have the figure, you have the actual number of how many recipients or gays who have the foster kid in their
Oh, you mean the parents?
The parents.
The parents. No, we don't, because we do not ask people on their application or in the homesteading process. If they choose to tell us and identify themselves that way, that's a choice. But we don't ask people to tell us.
It's not a requirement.
It's not a requirement that people disclose their sexual orientation to us.
So I was licensed. I'm a licensed foster parent, but through a private agency. And I understand that I can't even provide temporary care, even though I have like space for children in the state foster system, because I'm licensed through a private agency, and so I have children that are assigned to me through the private agency, through the Lutheran. And are you not familiar? You look like maybe
Well, so if you're a licensed foster parent, whether through a private agency or through the state oversees the private agencies. So if you're licensed through the private agency, you're eligible to take any child in the foster care system. So let me clarify that. Children in the foster care system, we have a placement resource desk. So when a child comes into care or they're in the need of a placement, they're moving placements within the foster system, we work with our private agencies. So our placement desk staff would call agencies or email. We have like a listserv of agencies that we work with. They would send a child placement referral on a child. So Lutheran could respond to that and say, okay, we have this home right here that has an opening and this looks like a good match for this kid. So that's something that you would have to talk with your agency about. But yes, we do work with Lutheran right now.
okay, I know
Yeah.
that they license them, but somehow I thought that I couldn't take children from the state system, because I would like to, and I have space, and I would like
So-
to
But
be
you're
able
licensed
to.
foster parent, all the children are the state. When we say-
Are you working with the refugee
Yes,
program?
yeah.
Oh,
Okay, so that might be a little bit different. I would talk to your licensor at Lutheran and ask them if you can take foster care kids through the system. And then if they have some questions, they can call me and we can kind of work that out. Yeah, find out what the difference is.
My question is, how accommodating you guys are based on the child's belief, culture, and religion? How do you guys accommodate that?
Culture, religion, belief, language, food, those are all very important aspects. And when I talked about the child and family matching, those are definitely factors that we consider. Federal law prohibits us from delaying or denying a child, either delaying or denying a child joining a family based on race, color, or national origin. But culture, which is language, religion, food, all of those things, absolutely, those are very important, and we do our very best to try to match. However, when we have a disproportionate number of children of color and children of other cultures in our system, and we don't have enough families that are of the same or similar culture to really meet all of their needs. So we have to try to find other ways to have those children engaged with members of their cultural community.
So I have a follow-up question on that. When you say you find a matching, I get confusion. If you don't go deep to ask the sexually oriented or the status of that kind of person, how do you match up with this kid? If you don't go ahead to ask, oh, are you gay or lesbian, how do you match up with this kid?
Okay, we ask families in the home study process, what are the characteristics of the child or children that you envision bringing into your family? Who can you